I feel like a lot of the reasons that audiences are enjoying this movie are also the same reasons why the internet is hating it. Basically, that's comparing it to the 2002 animated version, but the real question is, or should be, is it as good as the Stitch anime? I'm just kidding, of course, but we might talk more about the Stitch anime. Because it is a thing that happened. However, for the most part in this video, we're going to be examining the Lilo and Stitch remake and talking about breaking down what is happening with its reception on the internet. Because I came out of this theater and I thought I knew how people were going to take this movie, and wow, was I wrong. I had to ask myself, when I came out of the theater, did a lot of people even really remember the original as fondly as I did? Because there were just some people too that were like, who even cares about Lilo and Stitch? And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't know that it was a film that people just thought was meh originally. I mean, guys, the watercolor backgrounds in that movie. The watercolor backgrounds. The fact that Lilo and Stitch, the 2002 animated film, also was made for $80 million as an animated movie in 2002 is insane. A hand-drawn animated movie that cost that much, and flash forward to 2025 when we're getting this remake, which also cost a lot of money, but relative to that previous price tag, it only cost us in 2025 $100 million. That's crazy to me. Now, when it comes to this remake that cost us $100 million, I have to say they made a lot of changes. Some of those changes are good, some of those changes are not so good. Really, I feel like a lot of the changes they made are focused on grounding this adaptation more in comparison to the animated film, which makes a lot of sense when you consider it is animated, so it can be a little bit more zany because of that. And I do feel that some of these changes really work. Like, for example, the idea that Nani actually has to give up Lilo because of the cost of medical bills. So there is a scene in the movie, obviously, where Nani and Lilo and David and Stitch are all surfing, but in the remake version, they fall in the water, they get Lilo out, but Lilo actually kind of drowns a little bit and they have to go to the hospital. And when they go to the hospital, Nani has all these bills, especially because she didn't actually sign up for insurance, so now she has to pay all of those bills, and she's basically forced to consider giving up her guardianship of Lilo because she just can't pay the bills. Whereas if the state takes over Lilo's guardianship, then they'll be able to cover those costs for Nani. And I feel while this is maybe too real for some people, I liked that it was a real approach, and I liked the lens that it kind of gave us of putting us in Nani's shoes as this 18-year-old kid who basically has to now become a mom to her younger sister. I thought that was such a touching story. And while some people, I think, are here for this, other people seem to think that the additional character that we have here, our new social worker that we meet, played by Tia Carrere, who you may know as Nani from the original animated version of Lilo and Stitch, is evil? Is Tia Carrere's character, Mrs Kekoa, evil? Or what is happening here? And why did Cobra Bubbles sort of get replaced in his role as the main social worker? Although obviously Cobra Bubbles is still in it as a CIA agent that goes undercover, but he is working with Tia Carrere's character as opposed to him being the main social worker here. Which, once again, I feel like this is a change they made just because it's more grounded. Because the idea of having a CIA agent undercover as a social worker, it doesn't really reflect great on that system, and it also makes it feel just a bit more not real as what they're doing in this movie, where they're really trying to explore what would it be like if Nani were in this situation in reality with Lilo, and what would that approach be. And I have to say, when it comes to, is Tia Carrere's character the villain of the film? No, I don't think she's the villain. I mean, you know, she is here, she's trying to help Nani. She drank the Capri Sun that was brought to her and Nani pretends it's tea. She drank that all. I feel like she is a person who's trying to help Nani, but really people are just misunderstanding that the situation is really the villainous element there. That's the challenge that Nani is up against. But it's not because Tia Carrere's character doesn't want good things for Nani. She's not like cackling in the background like, ha ha ha, I will take Lilo away from her. That's not happening, okay? And I'm a little bit concerned when people think that that's what's going on, because clearly we all know the real villain in this story is Gantu. Just kidding, because Gantu's not in this film. Yep, he got cut. We're going to talk about the real villain in the movie later on, but there is a reason that our director here decided to cut Gantu, and he actually stands by it. Also, the director of this film is Dean Fleiscer Camp, who, if you were not familiar with, he also directed Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, which is a film that I really want to watch and looks super sweet, but I think is probably a bit of a different vibe than what we're getting here. Although, to be fair, I think Camp is at least bringing some artistic integrity to his approach on Lilo and Stitch, even though it is more commercial than Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. And the reason that he cut Gantu, the reason that he talks about for doing that, is because they kind of tried to make Gantu work in the movie, but just felt that he didn't really fit in with their approach because, like I said before, and like Camp has said, they're really trying to kind of ground this movie a little bit more. And Camp talks about the idea that with the animated film, it's just kind of a different medium than what they're doing. I mean, it is a completely different medium. They're both film, but one is animated and one is live action. Even with CGI, those are really two different mediums. And so Camp felt that you can't really do the animated version as it is and make it work and make it feel realistic. So they're just doing that. Now, what this means is that we get a lot more of a focus on the human characters, like an expansion into Lilo and Nani's relationship. There's a lot more happening with them, and I actually loved that element of the film. I even loved the additional human characters that we get in it, like Nani's neighbor, who is just kind of there and is fiercely protective of Lilo and Nani and is rooting for them, and honestly is a great support character for them as well. But I will say with this that I did forget for a moment that this was a movie about Stitch, because we get Stitch in the beginning and then it goes off to Lilo's story with Nani and all of that stuff gets built, and then Stitch arrives again on the scene and I was like, oh yeah, this is a movie about Stitch. I almost forgot, even though he's in the title of the movie. Now, this connects to an issue I do have with the film, which, yeah, let's talk about that. Because we focus on the human characters so much that the aliens even become humans for most of the movie, which might also be because of budget reasons, but might also be because of, you know, this grounded approach to the film. I mean, after all, how believable is it if you have literally just an alien with one big eye running around in a wig? Is that a really great disguise, or would it make more sense for them to be disguised as humans? It does make more sense. But the problem, I think, with the film, really, especially when it comes to Stitch, is that while I think they visually did a great job with Stitch, I think the model looks great, I think all of that is amazing, it misses somewhat in exploring the journey of Stitch, the character arc of Stitch, which is really the reason I think that audiences initially loved and connected with that character. I love what they add for Nani and Lilo, but ultimately it means that things have to be cut, like Gantu and like some of Stitch and Lilo's relationship development, and also some of Stitch's character development in general, which is directly tied into Stitch's relationship with Lilo. For Stitch, I feel like what we really miss out on is his exploration of his identity and his purpose in the world. When he comes to Hawaii, he doesn't have anything that he can really easily destroy, and so his purpose is taken from him, and he's forced to examine what that means and what his purpose really is, or what he wants it to be. He tries to fit in here, but I feel like in the remake, it's actually less about him finding his place and finding his purpose as it is about him kind of falling into a situation and then getting comfortable in it and seeing the potential in it as like a place where he could just live and be. One of my favorite parts of the animated film that gets cut in the remake is actually connected directly to Stitch's character development, which is his discovery of the Ugly Duckling storybook and how he relates to that story. I feel like this was missing, and man, did I also just miss it? In the animated movie, Jumba, who is sort of staked out with Pleakley, watching Stitch on the night where he's up, he's restless, he doesn't really know what to do with himself, he's watching him through these night vision goggles, and Jumba observes, 626 was designed to be a monster, but now he has nothing to destroy. See, I never gave him a greater purpose. What must it be like to have nothing? Not even memories to visit in the middle of the night. Whew. I get goosebumps thinking about that line. I feel like it's just so deep. And even though when I first saw this film, I don't think I really understood fully what that line meant, I think the reason why the movie connects with a lot of the younger audience and kids is because as a kid, you can really relate to Stitch. Stitch is trying to figure out who he is, and when you're a kid, everyone's constantly asking you who you want to be, who you're going to grow up to be. It's a lot of pressure, and even as an adult, I connect to the story because, spoiler alert for kids, I guess, if there are any kids watching, you never really figure out who you're going to be. It's kind of like an ever-evolving journey, and every morning you wake up and kind of ask yourself that question. So it's always something that I think is relevant to people, this idea of identity, of self-discovery, who am I, what do I want, what do I need in life, purpose. And I think without the Ugly Duckling book, it doesn't mean that we don't have to have that at all, but unfortunately, it does seem in the remake that it just gets watered down without the presence of that beat. We do get an element where we explored a little bit with the car scene where, you know, Stitch is driving around in the pink car and realizes he's on an island and he kind of loses it. He's like, I can't destroy anything. And while there is an element that is exploring this idea of he doesn't have that purpose, so it's frustrating for him, it also kind of feels like it's just reduced to a joke. I mean, Lilo says in reaction to this, isn't it nice to be on an island with no big cities? So instead of this being this big moment that is really heartfelt, it becomes a joke instead of being the heart, the core of what the movie is. And I think in relation to Lilo, we also see a bit of an absence in regards to understanding her character fully. We do get into the fact that she's weird, she's kind of whimsical, she's quirky, you know, she doesn't necessarily take pictures of tourists on the island, but she does do things like try to free chickens. She's an oddball, and we explore that. And I think we explore a little bit of it being Lilo kind of acting out because she doesn't feel that she belongs, because she's being mistreated by other kids, and because of the tragedy of losing her parents so young. But we don't really explore, I think, ultimately why people develop that quirky nature to them. It's not just about, you know, feeling different, being different. People want to stand out when they feel that they've really never fit in. And so it's a bit of a rebellious act for Lilo, is the way that I always saw it. This idea of, well, I'm not going to fit in anyways, so I may as well just be weird and different and do my own thing and own it. And I know as a kid, I definitely felt that, and I definitely was a weird kid. And even as an adult, I feel like I still am like that. I still do things that are different. I mean, I dress up to go see movies, and I have like a cat carrier that sometimes I carry a plush around in. For me, that was something that I really loved about Lilo and Stitch when I originally watched it, and even now, because it connected with me in the sense of I saw myself in these characters, these outsiders who feel like they really don't belong, who are weird and are misunderstood because they just want to belong to something but feel like they never can. That's why Lilo acts out. That's why she's so feisty. And while we keep a bit of that feistiness in her, it's not really as unhinged as the animated film is. Really, the animated movie is about two outsiders finding their place, their Ohana in the world, through finding each other. And this film kind of has a different approach to that. The film focuses more on the idea of Ohana as a family unit. So it's not just about Lilo and Stitch, even though that's still the title of the film. It's really about Lilo and Stitch and Nani and community and culture, to a lesser extent culture, but I think there's elements of that in there. So it's really expanding this idea instead of reducing it to just like, really it's about two people and there's other characters around that are involved. That's what this movie, I think, is trying to do. Which means because we're doing more, we get a bit less overall in terms of each individual character and their growth. I think ultimately this film is a bit of a tonal shift. Everyone is kind of toned down a little bit, watered down a little bit. Now, is this for safety because Disney's afraid of things like aliens running around in dresses? Or is it for reality's sake because we're trying to ground this, like Camp is saying, where, you know, it's just a different medium, so you kind of got to change it up to make it work? Or is it potentially both? Honestly, I think it's a bit of both. I do think that this film has a potential to be really off the wall and really kind of oddball. They could have gone further with it. It could have been more of like an indie film. I could see the potential of it being almost like a Little Miss Sunshine. Especially in the beginning of that film, I really felt that potential, those elements could have been there. But instead, they just decided to go the safe route, which I think will work out for them at the box office, but artistically, unfortunately, leaves you kind of feeling like you're missing a little something with it. The third act, to me, is the weakest part of the film, and having gone back and rewatched the animated movie, Lilo and Stitch, I gotta say, I really understand why I felt that way. I think that the ending for the animated version is just better in the sense that everything feels like it's coming full circle. Everything that's been built up throughout the movie has been leading to that ending for all the characters. There's so much character development, growth, and plot points that lead you to that ending that feels cohesive and like it's got a great clean flow. Whereas with the remake, it feels like a series of events that just happen kind of one after the other. And then the idea is that, you know, Stitch gets to find a new home in the end. So it just feels a little less smooth. It feels a little bit more clunky. Ultimately, I feel like the ending in the animated film has better payoff, where the ending in the remake is kind of too busy protecting characters from the consequences of some of their actions to allow us to feel that payoff. There just isn't enough accountability and enough character growth, I think, in the ending of the remake, which is unfortunate. Also, I gotta say, let's talk about the villain situation here. Poor Jumba. Also, Jumba being played by Zach Galifianakis. Look, I like Zach Galifianakis as an actor, but what is up with this casting? This is the one casting that I was really like, but why though? What happened? Especially when considered that Jumba is originally played by David Ogden Stiers, an amazing voice actor in tons of Disney stuff. Rest in peace, no longer with us. But the choice to cast Galifianakis in that role as opposed to, I don't know, so many other people that I think maybe would have fit it better is a strange choice. And then they decided to make Jumba the villain. I think that is very controversial. I think it works. I think it's the only way that they really could have done it, having gotten rid of Gantu, obviously. But, whew, I understand. He's a mad scientist, but you know, not all mad scientists are bad. Ultimately, the ending of this with the whole idea of, you know, Stitch in the end after Lilo and Stitch kind of save each other, and then the ship explodes, and then they're in the water, and Lilo is recovered, she's fine, and then Stitch has to be pulled out of the ocean by Nani, who's walking across the bottom of the ocean. I liked that element, by the way. I felt that that element was cool because it called back to Nani training as a marine biologist, but the whole idea of bringing Stitch back to life and rejuvenating him, it just felt like a lot. But you know, it did remind me of something. It reminded me of the Stitch anime. The ending of this movie is really, that high point of the ending is really about Nani saving Stitch, which I think is also just goes to show you how what they've done is they've really opened up the cast in terms of the importance of all these characters. Not that Nani wasn't important in the animated film, but the height of the animated film for the ending is really about Stitch saving Lilo. And that's because Stitch has been building up this whole time to this idea of being selfish, being dangerous, being chaotic, being destructive, to in the end, he does something to save someone, to protect someone that he loves. Also, he saves that frog. Ultimately, the animated film just does a better job of calling back to everything that it's built throughout, whether it's character development or even jokes. I mean, the mosquitoes get referenced multiple times, which I really liked. The frog comes back, and Stitch even saves the frog to just also really drive home that Stitch is a changed character by the end of this film. Now, I guess the question is, when it comes to why people dislike this remake so much, or dislike remakes in general, What's up with that? I think it boils down to, what is the point of remakes? A lot of people ask this question. I myself have asked this question. I think the answer is pretty clear, and I think it's an answer that a lot of people kind of feel a bit icky about, and that is, the point is to make money, baby. Make those dollar bills. That's also why these remakes end up feeling oftentimes hollow, because they're just focused on giving us a recycled product and then kind of rebranding it to make it feel new. However, when it comes to the Lilo and Stitch remake, the thing that's kind of disappointing to me is I feel like it's getting dragged a lot, when in this case, I think that Camp actually was earnestly trying to give us something that feels fresh, and it does feel fresh at times. They're at least trying to do something different with it. Camp is trying to give us a new perspective, the Nani perspective. Now, whether or not you like that perspective or whether or not you feel like it works, I mean, that's up to you. But I think when it comes to remakes, the reason that people are just so done in general, which is overflowing onto like just basically drowning out what's happening with Lilo and Stitch a bit in terms of the discourse on the internet, is that we have this remake and it's a product of the Disney remake factory. People are just tired of getting these remakes from Disney, and it feels like they're just churning them out like they're nothing, you know? They're just grinding up all these ideas and making just goop, just commercial goop that they're trying to sell to us. And it's all about merchandising, and it's all about brand, and it's all about growing Disney. But that doesn't mean that the film can't say anything artistically. So it's kind of a challenging thing to balance there. But also when it comes to Lilo and Stitch the remake, we really have one film to compare it to, and that film also only came out in 2002, so it hasn't even been that long. We haven't had a lot of time, and that film is still beloved for a lot of people. Or it's just meh for a lot of people, which really makes this remake, I imagine, worse for those people because they're not even attached to the original, so why should they even care about this? But you know, even though some people might say, I don't even care about this and I'm over remakes, and we have the original, so why should I care? You know who does care? The box office seems to care, because people are spending money. It is making a lot of money in the theaters. So unfortunately, I feel like remakes are not going to be going anywhere anytime soon. And I don't even want to know how much money they're making on merch. All I'll say is when I went to see it in theaters, there was merch everywhere. Everyone was buying from the concessions merch. Everyone brought their own merch. I'm wearing merch. The merch sales have to be insane. And they're not going to tell us how much they're making on that, so just keep that in mind. But the idea of remakes isn't new. It actually is something that we've been seeing time and time again for a long time. I mean, we had the 2024 Nosferatu remake that happened recently, and that was very well received for the most part. But I think that has to do with the fact that the original is way older, and a lot of people, I think, didn't even necessarily know about the original. Some people, I think, thought it was a remake of Dracula, basically, which it's not, but that's we could get into that in a whole other video. I did a immediate reaction on Nosferatu, and maybe at some point I'll go back and do a full review on that, because I do still have thoughts on that film. But even with John Carpenter's The Thing, I feel like that is a remake, and when it came out, a lot of people forget that that movie was not necessarily well received because people were comparing it to the original and they didn't like that it was so different. And I think we're seeing a little bit of something similar with Lilo and Stitch. Now granted, I don't know if it'll become as iconic as John Carpenter's The Thing, so time will tell if the time heals this wound, or if it just makes us completely forget about this completely because it just wasn't as memorable as maybe we wanted it to be. Speaking of that, I will say overall, I gave my rating before and I gave it a 4 out of 5 right out of the theater. Having thought about it a little bit more, I think I want to give this one a 3.5. I still thought it was really good. I still had a lot of fun with it, and I don't normally give halves, so that is a testament to the movie. But it is so different, and especially going back to the animated film, I just feel like the animated film is better. And this movie was still fun. It's broken, but it's still good. Let me know your thoughts on this movie down in the comments below. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Are you just like, it was okay? Or are you like me and you're like, it was pretty good. I had a fun time with it. Let me know where you're standing with that. And as always, until next time, stay nerdy. Bye! Also, if you like when I talk about Disney stuff, you can check more of that out over here.